Digital lives are complicated, and I mean that in a good way. I was having a conversation recently with someone who isn't really in the video game scene. They were expressing to me their disdain for video games that are violent. A perfectly understandable stance. Hyperviolence can be a real issue in video games. As a pacifist myself, I get it. But as the conversation went on, it seemed clear that we were speaking two different languages. The problem is that in their perspective was an obsession with ending the lives of others in violent ways. I'm not going to say that no one feels that way about their experience with violent games, but I certainly have yet to meet that person. The people that I know that play hyper-violent games just aren't so simple. It's not so cut and dry. This leads to a truth that is presented in the documentary we're going to be focusing on in this series of November called The Remarkable Life of Ibelin. When you queue up this documentary, you're going to be presented with a worldview that gamers know all too well. Mats is an adolescent and eventually young adult who is diagnosed with Duchenne's disease, a rare and traumatic muscular dystrophy. He has no idea when he's going to die, but he knows that death will find him too young. And it does, at only 25 years old. In the first 20 minutes of this documentary, we're given the tour de force of Matt's life from his family's perspective. Matt is reclusive. He spends all his time playing video games, 20,000 hours. Weird that his family knows that number. Kind of sounds like hyperbole, right? Of course, the family mourns for this death sentence on their son's existence. They reflect on watching him struggle to walk and stand as a child. They express their guilt at watching his dreams vanish. They take it upon themselves to try and make each day a nice day, taking Mats to the amusement park, concerts, getting him a nice wheelchair, doing everything within their power. But they also see Mats playing games and they have these mixed emotions, worried he's missing out on too much of life. Seems depressed. He's got a lack of appetite, a lack of desire to be with others. Does he even have any friends at all? Matt's family reflects, if you're gaming 12 hours a day, you don't have time for anything else. About 20 minutes into the film, the family shares that Matt's last video recording is of his uncle's wedding, and he just goes to sleep and is gone. But the documentary doesn't let the story stop there. The family discovers Matt's password to his blog. They log in and post about his passing as he wished for them to, and they can't possibly expect what comes next. Email after email after email after email. Matt's changed my life. Matt's was my dear friend. Matt's was someone who I deeply respected. I wouldn't be who I am without Matt's. As a parent, this brings tears to my eyes. My kid was loved. My kid had friends. My kid made a difference. It's all I want. It turns out that Mats is a prodigious World of Warcraft player. Not just any WoW player, but an RP server player, which means he was deeply in character as Ibelin Redmore, private investigator. He was a role player for this character. As you would learn from the documentary itself, Mats doesn't just live in a basement. His parents were so wrong. They realized too late that they didn't even know. Matt's life was complicated. He has a serious crush on someone. He has flirtatious encounters, and he gets jealous of her. She gets jealous of him. Mats has fights with people in the Starlight Guild that he's a part of. Mats has disagreements with those around him, but he also helps people work through their own trauma, their troubles. He listens, he hears what others need him to hear. He says what others need him to say. He serves the community around him. He builds bonds, and as we're going to look at in part 2 of the series, he is even going to help break boundaries of others in life-changing ways. See, this film masterfully documents a transition that must happen from the outside world looking in to the world of nerds, geeks, and gamers. Just like my friend at the start of this video, we have assumptions about gamers. We think we know who they are and how they feel and what they bring to the table. We assume they live in their mom's basement, they probably don't smell great, or that they only want violence for the sake of violence. We assume that everybody just sees Nintendo games as kids' games, and we assume far too much, because digital lives are complicated. You simply cannot judge a video game by its cover art. Look no further than this channel, y'all. I'm a gamer. The games that I talk about, those inside the gaming community often haven't heard of, let alone those outside. I'm a nuanced gamer, and I would argue we all are. Maybe there are some who truly only grab up the latest COD game and barely even call themselves a gamer, but that is far from the normative experience, because digital lives are complicated, just like every other life. And while I know this wasn't Matt's parents' intention, we aren't anyone's science experiment. Others don't actually know how gaming is impacting us until they start talking to us about it. Proverbs chapter 18, verse 2 says, "A fool takes no pleasure in understanding, but only in expressing personal opinion." The first chunk of this film is a foolish perspective. It doesn't make it any less heartbreaking and important and real. This is a family that experienced a loss that no one should have to experience. But they also missed out on a whole chunk, a real chunk of their son's life, his real life, because they missed the opportunity for understanding. And that's the argument of this first part of this series. When we forget that digital lives are complicated, we miss the chance to experience that person as their whole self. At the end of the film, after we've heard the whole story of just how important Matt's was to his community, we get to hear Matt's father reflect on the thoughts that he had at the start of the film. He says, "The biggest pain your mother and I suffered through life was that you, because of the illness we brought you into this world with, should not experience falling in love. You should not experience friendship. You should not experience social relationships and joint activities with others. You should not experience contributing to society and playing a meaningful role in other people's lives. This was by far our biggest sorrow. You proved us wrong. You proved us so wrong. And you proved yourself so resourceful. But it has only been the last week that we really got close to realizing the full impact of the digital community in his life." Here's my word to you. Whoever is watching this series, it doesn't have to be this way. You don't have to miss out on the whole person. It doesn't have to be too late. And that is why this film is vitally important. See, the community that Matt's found in his guild wasn't a bunch of pixels on a screen. It was his place to be, to joke, to bond, to care for people, be cared for in return. That space became a real sanctuary, a place of connection. So often, people just assume that digital lives are escapes from reality. But the truth is that for many, it is their reality. It is where they feel the most seen, the most known, the most loved, authentically holy. That guild was Matt's church, a space built around shared experiences, real connections, and growth. That is exactly the kind of place we're building here at Checkpoint. In the Old Testament book of 1 Samuel, we get to hear of the iconic story of the Israelite people, the war against the violent Philistines and their mythologically large Goliath. King Saul and his army are no match for them until one day, a small shepherd from the line of Jesse shows up with full faith in God, David. He says, "Despite being smaller than all of my brothers, I can conquer this giant with just my sling. After all, I defended the sheep against the lions and the bears, and God saw me through that. So what is Goliath?" Now Saul takes a little bit of convincing, but eventually realizes, hey, why not? I have no choice. So he takes David into his quarters. He orders that the armor bearer affix Saul's own armor to David, and David is too small. The armor clinks and clanks on him, slowing him down, causing him to shift awkwardly about the place. He can barely walk. "I'm not used to these," David says. He takes the armor off, gathers his staff and 5 smooth stones, and he goes and he slays Goliath. Saul made an assumption. Everyone made assumptions. David's too small, too weak. And even when they do decide to give David a chance, Saul still tries to shape David into the box that he desires, a soldier and warrior clad in expensive armor. But David is not used to these. When Saul strapped his own armor on David, he was essentially saying, if you want to fight, you have to do it like this, like me. But David couldn't even move in that armor. He knew he had to fight with his own strength. Matt's family tries to make things right for him. They take him to this amusement park, but he writes in his blog later on that when he was there, he was miserable and felt like a freak. He was not used to being here. And then he writes about running laps around Azeroth as Ibelin. Did you hear me? Matt's ran laps. How often have I taken for granted video games giving me the power to walk and to run, to be who I am used to being? It's beautiful. We are made in the Imago Dei, the image of God. That means every part of us, our kindness, our creativity, and yes, our complexity. It all reflects something divine. And guess what? That includes our digital lives. When we're online sharing our joys, struggles, and stories, these digital reflections of ourselves are no less sacred than anyone else's. They're reflections of the same divine image that we carry in the physical world. Matt's was no less an image bearer in his digital life than he was everywhere else. That digital part of us is sacred. You and everyone that you know has their own baggage and trouble. You're not a simple person. I'm not a simple person. I'm complicated. I am me. I cannot fit into the mold or the armor or the cultural norms that you expect of me. And yet, I am fearfully and wonderfully made. I am not used to being you. I am used to being who God made me to be. Stop trying to force the armor to fit the person capable of already slaying giants. Matt spent 20,000 hours over 10 years in World of Warcraft. He didn't waste them. He meant something to people. because he was where he was used to being. His digital life was no less important than his physical life because they were the same. One of the most incredible things about digital lives is how they allow people to be truly vulnerable. Matt was able to open up in ways he might never have been able to face-to-face. Online, he could be his truest self, free from the looks or judgments that the physical world might bring. That digital space doesn't make him any less real. In fact, it made him more real. Digital lives are often the places we find the courage to share our deepest thoughts, fears, and hopes, those parts of us that might feel fragile or hidden in other places. If you truly care about the digital native, then you must start asking the question, who are you? Instead of telling them what you believe to be true about them, or what you want them to do to change themselves to better fit your mold, or wear your armor. Start hearing their stories, laughing at their relationship drama. Grab a drink with them over a virtual ex-girlfriend in their guild, or a crush they can't shake from their head. If you're watching this, maybe as somebody new to this whole concept, or maybe as someone who is a part of this digital family already, know that you are seen, loved, and your digital life is not simply pixels on a screen. It is a real part of who you are, and it matters here because it matters to God. Digital lives are complicated. We have friends and love interests. We have guilt and fights. We argue and bicker and laugh and joke. We are whole people. Don't stop 20 minutes into our life documentary. Roll back the film tape. See the whole person, not the one that you judged before they ever walked through the door. You know, I think this idea of stopping at 20 minutes, that's something we need to carry with us from this. Every single person that we meet, digital native or not, has a story that is a whole lot longer than the first impression. So often we make snap judgments. We walk away without ever learning anything deeper. We assume, just like Matt's family did, that we know everything that there is to know from the outside. But when we stop at those first 20 minutes of somebody's story, we miss out on all the beauty, all the depth, all the realness of who they truly are. So next time you encounter someone, lean in a little longer. There's more to see. This is why it is essential work that Checkpoint is doing. This is why we have a Discord space where the goal is not to point you towards some other church. We are church, a whole church for a whole person. And I expect that too of our members here. Don't give me half of yourself. Don't give me the first 20 minutes of your life. I want to be your whole pastor too. I want to know the stuff you're going through. I want to hear about what you are dealing with. We are not here for pleasantries or empty promises. I am here for the whole digital you. Don't conform to some kind of half person that you feel like you have to fit into, some kind of mold that the internet gave you. I'm not Mr. Beast. I'm not some parasocial relationship. I won't be treated like one. I'll stand my ground. I'm a whole person, and I welcome you as a whole person. This is why I don't say what I say in every single video with a weak chest. I am puffed up as I proudly proclaim that Checkpoint Church believes three things to be true about you, the whole you, the real you, the you that you are used to being. I believe you are loved by God. God loves you, digital native, and we love you, the whole you here at Checkpoint. We believe that means something, that you matter, that this part of you, what people sum up to being just a phase, kid stuff, hyperviolence, whatever they try to foist upon you, that part of you matters because you are made of sacred stuff. You are the Imago Dei, made in the image of God as a person who is more themselves on the internet than they could ever hope to be when wearing the armor of somebody else. This is the work we are committed to, whole person ministry for whole people, online, offline. Let's get past the 20-minute mark. Let's tell stories that run deep. Hear me when I say these aren't empty words or platitudes. God loves you. We love you. You matter. See you next week for part 2.